Okay.
Michael is.
Or,
That's
fine.
Right where Michael is.
Just a minute. Just a little bit.
Has Michael had anything to say yet?
Michael hadn't said too much.
Good. I can get my shoe.
Oh,
Try to call for that. What? Go call for that.
Well, I tell you, you guys make wonderful subjects.
Yeah, well,
Very
you know, when you ask that
photogenic.
question, you might go back to
Yes.
start with her.
what question is that?
Or even before, because
Yeah.
Grandpa Lee evidently did the same thing.
Consider
According to Aunt
Why
Cora,
didn't
you know, as far as that first question.
the first question.
What's that?
We're not started, are we?
What?
Why don't you
Well,
give us
we
a
want
warning?
to tell me with your lips.
You gotta signal us in here.
Hey, what was the first question?
That's the first of my questions?
No, what were you referring to when you said first question?
Oh, you know, what do we do to keep the
Oh, yes,
traditions going?
yeah, okay. Yes, what do you do? I'll start with Marie.
Okay.
How did you and my raise your family to keep the Chinese culture going?
Well,
Alive in the context of Idaho.
in the context of Idaho, I don't know very much about the context.
I'm sorry, I threw
No.
you off there. I really just want, how did you raise your children to ensure that they learned something about the Chinese culture?
Well, for one thing, we do take them to visit our Chinese friends in different cities. We go to Seattle, and I have two nephews and their wives, their family there. And then in Spokane, we have some very good friends that we have known for 65 years. I have known for 65 years. And of course, since Maya and I were married in 31, and he has known them too. We still have good friends there. And then in Walla Walla, we take our children at the time to visit many Chinese gardens. There are many, I imagine there are about 5 or 6 gardens there in Walla Walla. They raise onion and spinach and different Chinese vegetables too. And we take them, on our vacations, or we take them to visit our Chinese friends. And
to Chinatown.
And to
In
visit
every
Chinatown.
city.
Well, in every city we go, naturally we would look up the Chinatown first. In the first place, we have to eat, when we're visiting other cities, and that's where we go to first. And we like, in the old days, we like San Francisco Chinatown very much. But in the last few years, we enjoyed the Chinatown in Vancouver, BC, because it's a little bit closer to us in Moscow.
So you expose them to the Chinese culture?
Yes.
But do you ever sit down and teach them?
Well, we try to when they were younger, we tried to teach them Chinese characters. Although we don't know too much about it, because I came over here to the United States in 1920 when I was 10 years old. And my husband came with his father, and they settled in Walla Walla. His father has a restaurant there. And then, of course, he started school there and then finished high school at Walla Walla, and then he came over to Washington State and went to college there.
Did they get any formal instruction in the Chinese language?
My children?
Yes.
No. We tried to, but then there were no Chinese school here. And well, when my father came back from mainland China in 1962, he tried to teach him to read Chinese and sing Chinese hymns, the church hymns. but they were not interested in it too much, so he didn't get too far.
Okay, I think
How about you, Claire?
in the olden days, of my mom's generation, I think one of the things that they really did was try and get their kids to go back to China for so many years. In other words, they'd go back when they were
younger.
yeah, when they were younger, like 7th, 8th grade, or maybe even in high school, for a year or two of Chinese education. Okay, and for us, I mean, when Mom and Dad were raising us, actually, probably we went to Chinese like weddings and birthday parties and first month baby parties
In other cities.
and even some Chinese funerals. Well, not traditionally Chinese, but as Chinese as you can get it here.
Some Chinese funerals
Right.
down Lewiston.
Right, that's true.
We have quite a few.
But and now as far as we're concerned, I mean, each of us had our Chinese names, and that's about, we know them, but I don't even know if we can write them. Now Leonard at least can write it because he's a little older group, so he can. But now, as far as we're concerned, I have to make a concerted effort to, make sure my kids have some Chinese tradition.
Can
Okay.
you
All right.
elaborate on that?
Well, first of all, when we were growing up, Mom and Dad used to have parties where they'd invite the Chinese students from Wazoo and the University of Idaho and lots of the professors and their children. And we belonged to the Chinese organization when I was going to college, and Mom and Dad would always donate some,
And also the Cosmopolitan
right.
Club too when I was at college.
Okay. But now with us, first of all, I gave my kids Chinese names just because I have no clue, and I made the grandparents pick Chinese names. There's supposedly, in the male family, with every family name, there's supposed to be a poem, and each word of the poem indicates a generation. And so for example, in my brother, they're all he's, H-E, right?
Mhm.
He, like he-mong and he's son, okay? And I'm not pronouncing this correctly.
He said,
Okay, and so that they knew then that was the he generation. All of our cousins, of the boy cousins
that
are
the
all
same
are all
generation.
he's in the Liu family anyway. And then so I thought, well, maybe there was this type of thing in the Chin family, and so I tried to get Papa Chin to name Michael that word of the poem that would do it. Well, he was coming up with words like Bok Bon and these.
Bok means white rice.
Well, but I mean, this was from Fok
Fok
Choi
Choi,
and
Fok Choi.
Jung Hee or whatever it is. I mean, just crazy
Go Hee
names. So
Fok Choi.
I gave up. I just
And
I
Mahjong.
asked Mother Chin then to give us some Chinese names. So I did try with the Chinese name part, and I did try and have my kids go to Chinese school, which was absolutely it was just a real rough experience, not only for the kids but for us, because
Which Chinese school?
well, we had some Chinese students here. In fact, Connie, I think, even taught it for a while, and
She taught
and
at
they
the
really
university.
tried to teach the kids, but where they weren't getting any reinforcement from us at home. His family speaks Hakka. My family speaks some sort of Cantonese, and it's called Sia.
Cantonese.
And we can barely, I mean, we couldn't even get to the bathroom if we had to, in Chinese. I mean, that's that bad, okay? So they weren't getting anything at home from us. And so they would go there, and it would just be like that little block, at school, and they'd come home and they'd have nothing. And they were feeling frustrated. The other kids in the class were feeling frustrated. The teachers were feeling frustrated. The parents of the other kids were feeling, it was just awful. It was just and so finally I let them go on that. I did take my children, the two older girls, to China for a month. And we went into mainland China for 20-some days, and then we were in Hong Kong and in Taiwan. And I did that on purpose so that they would have, an identification, so they could feel their roots. And that was my first trip over there. And like Dennis said in his letter, that he said, I was just so thankful that, my grandparents, both mom's dad, and also Grandpa Lou had the foresight to leave China and to give us the opportunities that we had, for being Americans. It was just unreal. I just could not have imagined myself growing up in China. I mean, it was so awful. And yet I could see my grandfather's foresight. I went to his graveside. I went to the 3 buildings that he still owns in China that have been given back by the Chinese government to the families that want to take it over. And I could see what an intelligent man he was from where he picked each of the buildings, you know, in the town. I mean, one of them's right there by the police station. It's still there. And, you know, and in the busiest sections of town, so there was always rented. There was always business there. You know, it wasn't, I mean, here it is, I don't know, 40-some, 50 years, you know, from the time when he first, I don't know how
More
long
than
it
that,
was.
60, 70
Yeah,
years.
60 or 70 years, and it's still in a real going part of Canton. I mean, it was really unique to me, but still, I'm grateful, you know, for the fact that we're here.
I have a question for you, Mom, for a second to follow up. How do you feel about the Chinese culture, traditional culture, not necessarily being passed down the generations? How do you feel about that?
How do I feel about the
The
Yeah,
culture that the
It
fact
might
that
get
they are
lost.
not getting the culture that you guys had.
my father and mother didn't have. You
That
mean?
your parents had,
Oh.
but that Michelle and Michael will not have. That part of the Chinese
Oh,
culture.
oh. Well, in the first place, they lived in China for so many years before they came over, and periodically we go back there to China to visit. And
But how do you feel about them losing their culture?
How do you feel about the fact that Tony and Michelle and Jennifer and
well,
some of these kids are not
I
going to
think
have
anything that you don't get, you're losing. You know, I mean, now, like my grandchildren, well, of course, at this point, they have no chance to going back to doing too much traveling or visiting back in China, but eventually, when they are a little bit older, if they have a chance to go back to China to visit, I think that would be a good idea. That's that's a part of learning that the younger generation should get, and not only for my grandchildren and in the future great grandchildren, but I think everybody in this world, if they get a chance to, they should go to other countries to visit.
Well, the only thing is, Mom, you see, you were not one that pushed that. Dad was the one that pushed us.
I go right behind him.
Well, yeah, but the thing is, for example, when we were not planning on going to China when we did.
Yeah.
In fact, was that the year? Wasn't that the year of Mom's 50th anniversary? No, it was way before
no,
that.
you were all here.
That's right.
Uh-huh.
Okay, and Dad was the one that just said you're gonna go and you're gonna take the two kids. And I think we had Michael at that time too, didn't we?
still want to stay there with Mom
I
and
take
Dad.
care.
Right, and they
Michelle and I.
they volunteered to take care of the kids because they
to
wanted
take care
us
of
to
the
go to
two
China.
younger ones.
Period. And they wanted to expose the kids. I mean, Dad wanted us. In fact, he gave us no choice. He said, "I'll go and buy the tickets. You're gonna go to China." Period. And so there was no choice in that matter.
How did you feel about
Oh,
at first when your father brought up the idea?
well, I had never thought about it, and yet, you know, I had always listened to the stories about what happened, the Great Wall, how he felt when he walked the Great Wall for the first time, and going back to he had really wanted to go back to his village and
When he was born.
you know, and all these things, and after he came back, it really made me kind of think about it, but still, as far as my wanting to spend my money to do that at that time, that wasn't a priority until Dad just said, "You're going," period. And when Dad says you're going, you're gonna do, we did. I mean, he's bought us things, and he said, "Well, you're gonna buy this." We buy it. You know, whether or not we're ready to buy it, we intend to buy it. You're buying it. You're gonna do it. Just like, you know, for example, you know, like with one of the houses. You know, he just said, "You're gonna buy this house for me," and I had to buy it. He says, you know, he brought this piece of ivory, and he says, "You're going to buy this, Claire." And so I buy it, you know, without saying a thing. He just tells me we're going to do it, and we do it. And so,
But that's because
really
you want to do it, not because you. I don't think that you were forced.
it's
really
nothing
to.
that I would have done.
Well, that's what you want to do, see?
Not
Because
me.
you, not
See,
you.
I wouldn't have bought any ivories
No,
or
you
any of that
wouldn't.
type of thing.
You
I had
wouldn't
no
know much
real
about
interest in it,
you
know,
have, but those are the things that
that
he,
Dad believed.
that he feels that
Yeah.
you can afford to buy, and it's a good investment, and so you buy it.
So
Yeah.
you complied
Yeah.
in part because of respect,
Oh, yeah.
to a
Right.
great degree because of that.
Right.
Going back to the way you're raising your children, and teaching them the Chinese culture or helping them to learn about the Chinese culture. When you were speaking about that Chinese school, was that strictly a language school? And
Essentially, right. And they did teach them to do a little of the writing and maybe to read, just kind of explained a little bit how the words are formed and that type of thing. But my kids, like I said, didn't do all that well in it.
well, I'm curious, excuse me, Marie, I'm curious how the children felt about being asked to attend the Chinese school. How did you feel about it?
Well, no one's really excited about going to piano lessons and practicing a lot, and no one's really excited about learning a foreign language, and that means you have to do homework, right? So that's going to turn you off right away. But it was really difficult because there was nobody that we could ask help for. I mean, we could go to class and everything, but we were kind of embarrassed or shy to really speak up because we didn't do our homework, because we didn't understand what we were writing. We just knew these were lines on the paper, and that it goes downwards and it doesn't go across like we usually do. And then she would sit there and she goes, "Okay, read the story out loud," and I would sit there, totally speechless. You wouldn't know what to do. You would just kind of go, "Well, I didn't do my homework," and all the kids would look at you and you go, "You didn't do your homework?" I'm going, yeah, that's how it is. But otherwise, it was a good experience, I guess, if you really look back on it. But at that time, it was really hard, very difficult.
Would you generalize all of that to the other Chinese experiences that your parents expose you to or take you to or make you a part of?
It's just something to broaden my outlook on life. To, if you want to talk about things with people, you're like, "Oh, well, what do you think of, I don't know, nuclear war," or something like that. I mean, it kind of brings out more of an interest for you when you're having conversations with others, I guess.
The fact that you know more about your cultural background.
Seeing the Chinese movies or going to the meetings, camping with the other kids from the meeting. Yeah, it helps. I mean, it helps to know that there are others out there.
You speak Chinese?
No.
Anybody in the family?
No, except for Grandma.
Yeah. I guess I'm the only one that's keep up with my Chinese.
Well, and like I said, I've had to make this real effort to do this. So anytime anything Oriental comes through, they have to go and see it.
Plays.
Right. It would be
Dances.
acrobatic groups. I made them attend in Honolulu this summer. They had to go to the puppet show. We were planning on going to several Chinese movies, from dim sum to, there was a whole group of them over there because they're having their centennial or bicentennial, right, over there. And I look for these things to come up, and they are kind of fighting me right now because I've told them they are going to Taiwan, on that exchange program for overseas Chinese. And I thought that I was going to be able to send the two girls over at once, and that's how come I was waiting for Debbie to get into college, because you at least in all, Mary and I didn't get to do this, but it was right after us that all the other of my brothers and sisters went. In fact, we were the ones that kind of brought it up to the, like the Wong kids, I think, went, didn't they? And the Sons, no, the Wongs went, and then the Chans,
Our
did they
friends,
go?
no.
Just because we kind of brought this up to them and let them know that it was available, and that we had, the ones of us that had gone had really had a good experience, with it. And so I've already told my kids they're going to go. Well, now I found out they only take one from each family each year.
Oh.
So now Susie's going to go, and I'm giving her forewarning, for a year or so that she's going to be heading out there for that experience. And again, they have, like Wazoo offered this program in mainland China. You can get credit at Wazoo, and one of the professors over there is the one that's doing it, and I will send my kids. I will make that effort. I will put out that money so they will have that experience.
In all of these, is Leonard, are you together in all of these attempts to teach the Chinese culture?
Well, not quite as, not as quite as
Not quite as strong.
strong as she is, yeah, not quite as strong. I kind of think when these kids took Chinese lessons, even though they might not learn much Chinese because I know it's tough, at least they were associating with kids from different professors and different families, and I thought it was a good way to make good friends and lasting too. And they still do. They still have friends around. I think that's a
Right.
good benefit.
By reading the stories, or her telling us what the stories were, we understood how they thought and how through those stories I learned the culture of our background and stuff. It was really good. Going to China, it was really different though.
In what way?
I mean, I felt like I was a tourist, even though I was one of them. You know, I was a Chinese just like anybody else was there. But yet, everybody was wearing white shirts and black pants and riding bicycles. And I didn't feel like I was really a part of them, really. You know, even though I was the same. So but it was good because I saw that we had a Qin dynasty, and so I was really excited about that. And I just saw a lot of Chinese that we never.
Wasn't it on the Imperial? You know, they have all those little.
Yeah.
Where was it at? At the Summer Palace.
Of the 3 trips that my husband and I went to mainland China, we were one of the 300 Americans that were allowed into mainland China in 1972 after Nixon got opened up the door. And we were very, very lucky. One of the reasons was that we had been a good family, and we have 5 children that we're leaving here at home in Moscow. And just my husband and I went there to be able to get there. We were very appreciative that the American government let us go and the Chinese government let us come in. But we had to answer many questions at what our background is and if we had ever been criminals or anything like that, which we could answer in the right way, that we'd never done anything that was wrong as far as we know. And then another reason was that my husband's mother was 99 years old at that time, and he hasn't seen his mother since 1931 when he came back over here when we got married. And we get to visit with her, and she was just as active as she can be, and can see very well, and can eat well, and see well, and hear well. But for 2 years prior to that, though, she had kind of lost her memory. At 99 years, I guess you could expect that to be about normal. And but right after we saw her, she passed away about 3 months afterwards. So it just seems to us that she was just waiting to see my husband again, you know, before her life could end. And we were very glad that was the first time I saw my mother-in-law. Ever since, even though we have been married since 31, after we were married, we did not have the money to go back to visit China at first, because we were very poor and still working in the restaurant and everything. And then when we do have enough money that we could afford to go back, well, then the Chinese people closed the door, so we could not go back there until 1972. And then in 1978 and 1979, we went with the tourist groups. And in 78, we have a Chinese, my Lee family reunion there. My sister and brother-in-law from Hawaii, and my brother and his wife from Albuquerque, and Maya and I from here. And the only one we missed were my sister Shanye and her husband from Australia. The reason why they could not join us was because the Australian government had already allowed them to go with another group into mainland China. So, but we had a very good time there with and we visited the hospital in Shanghai because my sister and brother-in-law are doctors, and so we joined in with them, and then we went with people that in agriculture, and so we get to see that, you know, and then one of the really interesting things that they want to show to the tourists is the school children, the system that they work on. All the school children have wear one uniform, so even a person from the poor family, he would be dressed as well as a student from a rich family. I think that is a very good idea.
In all of your travels,
Yes.
well, in particular in China, were people aware that you were from Idaho?
Yes, we want to make sure that we're from Moscow, Idaho, and not from Russia, you know, and we are they. Well, we are more or less tourists too, like Debbie say, you know. Of course, we still will be wearing our dresses and slacks, you know, and while the others, the mainland people wear their uniforms. But everywhere we went, we were very welcome because they were bringing in money, you know, for the tourists from the United States or from other countries. They were very glad to entertain us, and we were given the best of hotel rooms, and even when we crossed the border from what is that town? Not Hong Kong, but into the mainland. We are searched, you know, and we are you have to. And one thing about it is that the women do the job just as much as the man. That for one thing, I like that, you know, because I'm being a woman. I want to be on the level with a man too, and so. But the United States people, we have a special room that just the two of us go into, and the immigration officers just ask the two of us in our private room, while the other people, even from Europe, they all go through outside a big room, you know, and we would serve a hot tea and ask very nice questions. Of course, we answered the best way we could do. We can and when we come out, we can only we cannot bring any Chinese money back with us. So at the border, they would have little trinkets, you know. You want to spend your loose change on or buy something, you can. Just spend all your Chinese money. When you go into China, you have to buy their money with the U.S. Currency.
Well, too, you know, that's one thing I noticed because we went with a Canadian group, and this was even 9 years ago, and we as American citizens were treated differently, much better than the Canadians.
Than anybody else.
Related to this question, you're fairly well traveled as a
Yes.
family or as a clan.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell if there's a difference between being a Chinese in Idaho or the Chinese in Vancouver in Canada or other places that you
No, there isn't too much difference. How other people they act toward us. No, we've always, well, most of the time we travel in a group, which was nice. But some of the time we travel by ourselves. Like in 1960, we start traveling. Then we went around the world for 6 months, we just closed the restaurant here because we were the only restaurant we have in Moscow at that time. And when we come back, when we open our door, all our customers come back. In fact, some of them say, "Oh, that's a good time for us to diet because we didn't have such good food then, you know." So we could have all our customers back within a very short time, and they were glad to have us come back.
What are you asking?
Well, I'm wanting
The
to know
Idaho.
whether being Chinese in Idaho feels differently or is different than being Chinese
In
being a
Vancouver.
Chinese in Vancouver, Canada.
No, notice,
I think
no,
you wouldn't
notice.
know.
There isn't too much difference.
You wouldn't know if you didn't live there, but I guess touring, tell you, I think there's a difference in the way tourists, you know, the way you're treated.
Yeah.
An Oriental in Europe is treated completely different from an American in Europe.
Yes.
I think you're to your
Any place.
advantage.
How so?
Yes.
I think it's to your advantage. I was never spoken rudely to. Of course, like I say, I have a completely different outlook on life anyway, but I was in Europe for 5 months and just traveling around Ural plazas, living in the, you know, hostels and
Hostels.
stuff. And I think that in lots of ways they didn't know what I was. And because people don't know what you are, you know, the bad feelings that they have against Americans, like in France, like in France particularly, is known to have bad feelings against the Americans. Well, I had no problems in France.
I'd like to get back to a question before you, Mary, that you never answered because we just sort of drifted away. It was about the culture being handed down from one generation to another. How did you react to that, and how do you feel about your nieces and nephew perhaps not getting the culture or traditional background that you had?
Well, I think that, like Claire says, I think that she's put a lot of effort into trying to get her kids as exposed as she can be, and really I think that they're probably as exposed as we were as kids. So, you know, I don't see
Yeah,
that
but
they
how about the
lost.
others? You see, because their
What
situation is going to
others?
be different. All your other nieces
Oh,
and nephews.
well, no. See, my other nieces and nephews are, yeah, they aren't gonna. Theirs are gonna be different. I think that if I had children, I would put the effort into keeping the culture up, because I think that that's very much what makes us the way we are. I
At
think
least
that
the better part
I
of
think that growing up, I've never felt like I was any different from anybody else. And I think that even though I've known all the time, like I was looking, you know, trying to remember things, and I was, you know, whenever you'd fill out your things, like when you're in children, they have, you know, your nationality, you know, I'd always fill out Chinese. I mean, it didn't even dawn on me, the fact that other kids were not filling that out. And so, just the fact that I was, and that I am, and that I was so sure of it, it just made me, you know, so assured, and, you know, having the traditions and having the family to back me, that I had no qualms. Or when people would call out and make, you know, comments. Susan was saying that, you know, people make comments about you know, whether it's race. Well, I figure, well, you know, if they aren't going to pick on my race, and they're going to pick me because you know, you're fat, or you have glass, or your hair is too long, you know, you buck teeth, you know, they're going to pick on you for some reason, if that's what they're going to pick on you, if they're going to pick on you. And so when they picked on me culturally, you know, like they would, you know, I've had, you know, kids as a child, I've had kids call me names and stuff, and yet I didn't think any differently than if they would have called a fat person fat. I mean, to me, that was just a part of them, and that's the kid it didn't bother, you know, sure, it bothers you, but it didn't really. I just kind of brushed it off like, okay, they have problems, they're also going to call that other kid fat, or they're going to also call that other kid, you know, a name for whatever their reasons. And it didn't even dawn on me the fact that mine was race oriented, you know, and theirs was not.
I'm curious how Susan and Debbie, Michael and Michelle feel about passing on or passing on your Chinese background, the knowledge of it, to your own children.
Oh, I
later on.
definitely will. I definitely will. But to extend on hers, I feel that when they call me names having to do with my race, it takes me more personal than if they tell me that I'm ugly.
So
Because
you're aware.
I think it takes me, it bothers me more because they're insulting my whole race. They're insulting my whole background and what I believe in. And that's worse to me than somebody calling me
And
something
she
else.
really gets offended.
You're making a distinction, whereas your Aunt Mary.
Well, yeah, you see, I do not feel that. I'm so secure in I knowing I'm Chinese and I'm knowing what my background is and feel so good about it that I'm above them. As far as I'm concerned, it does not make any difference. I mean, then they're just
Okay,
calling,
what
you
if,
know.
what if they would insult your family though?
See, that's
The
exactly
lose.
what they're doing.
No,
to me.
if
Start
they-
cutting apart the lose.
Well, if they cut apart, well, if they insult my family, that's one thing. But they're not insulting. I mean, if they cut them down for, it depends on what they're cutting them down for. What they're insulting. If they're assaulting only race, then I don't know, you know, that I would take that, because then they can also say, well, your dad was a sneaky businessman. You see, that would really bother me if they said your dad's a sly businessman.
You see,
And
and,
you see,
and yet
and yet
Debbie
you
is
see.
just as offended. I mean, I can remember, you know, her telling me about this case where she had this kid right up, you know, he insulted her in the bus, and she just picked him up, and all of a sudden she was thumping him against the window of the bus.
What was the,
Okay.
what
And
did you say?
and she and all the Oriental kids, you know, that were, it was the tennis team, and they were all trying to pull her off, saying Debbie was only kidding, you know, whatever. And she said, you know, there's two things. She's thumping him against the you know, against the window of the bus. You do not touch on, and one of them is my race, and the other is my family. Wop wop wop.
So that was that.
Thanks, Mom.
Well, I feel,
Huh?
Has anybody,
Whatever.
has anybody ever felt discriminated against because of your race?
See, see,
have to
this is
think
now. See, this is what I'm saying. When they say discrimination, I've always felt like I've been special because I'm Oriental, because I'm Chinese, and I've always felt it all the way through school. If in the classroom they would recognize, they would know me first, but before they knew all their other little faces in the room, they would know my name first. They would know, you know, their expectations of me. That they would know me first. So I always considered it special. I always thought that I'm so special that everybody's going to notice me. So, to me, it's never been a negative discrimination. It's always been positive, and it's, you know, and this is my experience with it. And therefore, when kids call me names, it's just the fact that they're noticing that there's something special about me.
How about the rest of the family? How about you, Susan? Have you ever had an experience where because you're Chinese, you were treated differently in a rather negative way?
A little bit, but not a lot. I mean, I don't think I could really remember. I mean, I was maybe in grade school or something. It was a long time ago. But not really.
Well,
I just kind of brushed off, to tell you the truth.
I think Idaho being a state that has so few people, even in the towns are so small, smaller than some of the bigger schools, that I think the American children accept foreign people more readily than they do in the larger cities like Spokane. Although I was never feel out of place when of course I was only in I started with the first grade, you know, when I came to Spokane, and at that time I don't think any of the other children do anything to hurt me in any way.
But I don't know if you're talking about the Idaho schools.
Well,
The small
I mean,
Idaho schools.
well,
Moscow's not a small
That's right, and I think
Idaho
that was
school.
one of the benefits in being raised in Moscow.
Yeah.
Because,
Yeah, you see,
you know, of the, you know, the fact that we are a
Yeah,
university
yeah.
city, that's our
Well,
main,
But it's smaller than
you know,
other,
the whole city are made
the
up
other,
of students,
states.
that are made up of students and faculty, and, you know, and I think that is where we've been really lucky in, you know, being raised in Moscow. Because, you know, for example, when I first started teaching in Deary, I feel glad that I was, you know, an Oriental teaching in a small community, because I feel that for the little Vietnamese kids that came through, the Koreans, and the Native Americans, so I'm not sure if we had any Mexican Americans, but you know, I feel that I was the one that kind of opened the door for them and made it easier for them to be accepted. You know, and I kind of felt, well, at the beginning, you know, my first few years of teaching, it wasn't that you know was outwardly, but I just kind of felt a little bit different, you know, amongst the faculty, as well as, you know, as maybe the way that the parents were kind of looking at me. In other words, well, she's that way because she's, you know, Oriental type of thing. And I have even been called, you know, the dragon woman, you know, the dragon lady, or, you know, stuff like this, you know. But again, I until I gained the respect, and a lot of the people still feel is because I'm Oriental that I expect so much of their kids, and that I, you know, demand, you know, and it's not because I'm the way I am. Lots of them feel it's because, you know, because that's my upbringing, you know, because I'm Oriental. Therefore,
And yet it's associated with something positive.
Right, it is now. At the time, it was a little bit difficult. You know, my first classes were a little bit difficult, but now I think that they, you know, they expect, I guess, Orientals to be hardworking and the expectations to be great, and that we see beyond just today. And my students know that that I'm interested in their their total future. You know, from the type of people they marry, to what they do with their lives, to what they do for careers. And so where you know, some people just want to teach the subject matter and that's where it ends. In fact, I've been told that in some ways I work, you know, that I get too much into the personal lives of my kids, and I keep telling these people is because, you know, I've had, you know, the next generation of kids, I know all the parents, and so therefore it's natural for me to be able to tie things in and expectations of them, etc. And but anyway, I feel that
I think it's a good time to ask if all of you were to think of a contribution or contributions that as the people, as Chinese, you would have made to your community or to Idaho in general. How would you respond to that?
okay. I would say probably foremost is our strong family ties, and our being willing to work hard, and at least in our family, our strong belief in education.
How about you, Debbie?
Well, I don't know. You can't really contribute too much to Idaho, you know, when you're this age, and I just go along with my mom. We do have very strong ties, and I feel really special being a Chinese and stuff, because you have a bonding with all the other Orientals, because you feel that they share something that you have, because they have the same background as you. And even though you're not really related, you feel like you're cousins, or or brothers or sisters or something, and you just tie in with that person really easily and have that relationship with them.
At the same time that you have this closely knit feeling of being Chinese or being Orientals, do you feel that as a group with such a strong feeling about being together, do you feel though that you are easily able to integrate into the community, the rest of the community?
Mm-hmm.
I think in many ways, I think we've been lucky to be of the race that was really, at least in the time, of course, to be pretty easily accepted. You know, it's sad that, you know, all the races haven't had it as easily as we. And, I don't know whether I dare get on this subject, but I feel that because of the black movement and everything, that it has made it easier for us as Orientals
to be accepted.
to be accepted. And for that, I mean, they're the ones that have gone through the suffering. And we have been able to benefit from that. And I just, like I said, I think that we're a group, you know, and the Oriental group has been really pretty easily assimilated as far as our culture and our foods and our style of living, and even though, you know, we can be really Oriental, but still when our friends would come in, they could see, you know, us as being Oriental, but they could accept some of our differences and say that, you know, it's okay, you know. And I think I don't know how to quite explain that. Where they haven't, like I said, with the Native Americans, they haven't so much with the, maybe the Middle Easterners, you know, they haven't with the blacks, they haven't with some of the Mexican Americans as easily as it has been. I don't know, maybe I'm just seeing it out
It's
of,
easy for the American Japanese.
what, pardon?
For the American Japanese, they didn't have it very easy when they had to go in the concentration camps.
Well,
when
I know, but
that's
that
on account
wasn't,
of
yeah.
Second World
Oh,
War.
I know, but they had problems too.
They had
Right.
lots of problems.
I mean,
And again, I'm willing to
They're-
admit it's because of the
they're
times that
we are.
we're in, too.
So, Marie, would you say, how was it? When
Well-
you were, say, going to college, before we go into that, let me clarify something I had heard. Where did you go to get your college education?
I got it from Moscow High School and the University of Idaho.
And
And-
at that time, how many Chinese students were there?
I was the only Chinese student there. I was the only Chinese student, as far as I'm sure I was the only Chinese student in 1929. I started college at 1929.
And then when you graduated,
In 1933.
and you
I
graduated,
graduated 2 years after I was married, because we wanted to get married in 1931 when my husband came back over here, and we decided, well, we were married when I was 21 years old and on my birthday, and I feel that Moscow and the University of Idaho and Washington State too help our family to be what we are. And Idaho is a very good state to be in, and we lived in, my parents and I lived in Washington for 6 years, but really Moscow is my home. I have been here since 1926, and I would never want to go any place else to live. Idaho and Moscow have the best weather as far as I'm concerned. We're a little bit cold in the wintertime, but we need that cold too, to kill the bugs and the germs and all that, you know. And I enjoy the four weather that we have, and Moscow especially. At one time, my father said, "Why don't you come over to Honolulu and buy a house there?" I said, I would never live in Honolulu. About 30 days or 3 weeks is just about all I can stand anytime I'm over there. I said, I want to get back to Idaho. That's where we have the greens, and we have the grains, and then we have the trees, you know, and we have our weather, and I love it.
I,
I'm sorry. I have a question. You know, Idaho is considered a pretty redneck state. I mean, there aren't very many people other than white people in Idaho. And I was wondering if anybody here felt that you would have been better off in a more progressive kind of state, like maybe California or New York, or
Not me.
You know what I mean?
Oh,
Yes.
okay, well, don't print this one, okay. So
Don't
shop
print
your
this one?
thing.
Okay, we won't print anything.
But,
We'll take pictures.
to be honest with you, between Wazoo and the University of Idaho, I mean, if you want to see the rednecks, there's a lot of them over in that end, okay? As far as the business people, you know, in comparison to us, I think
Well,
Moscow
business
is,
people,
yeah, I
yes.
think Moscow is
But not
really, I mean, you're
Washington
not running
State.
that thing.
You
We're-
don't-
we're-
you don't-
we're
you don't
recording
say
everything.
that
We just
about
want-
Wazoo.
well, we're editing it.
Yeah, but not
Yeah,
Washington
I-
State
I want
versus
that
the
down.
University of Idaho.
I told you to shut that thing off.
Well,
Huh?
that's, that.
No, I didn't
No.
mean Wazoo
You
then.
said Wazoo.
I'm
You
sorry,
said
I
Wazoo.
didn't mean,
See, it's Pullman.
yeah, it's,
Business
yeah, I
and-
just,
We
I
are,
just
yeah,
didn't see
we're
that
editing
not.
it, so.
I just didn't.
You know, actually, very, very closely related to Alan's to that question is, it would seem that you all perceive you've kind of an ease in terms of fitting into the community. I would be curious to know what that has essentially opened for you, say memberships in organization, fraternal organizations. Has that been open to you as easily as, well,
It was not
Excellent.
open to us at all in my time. We were, although we were not able to get into hardly any association except for the church and the farmers part of the community. You know, we like the 4-H and those things we can go into, and anything related with education, we were very welcome into their doings.
but some of the fraternal and
Mhm.
other
Some
civic
of the fraternals,
organizations were not.
They were not. They would not welcome us.
How about in your generation, Claire and Mary and Leonard?
Well, we've never been really formally invited. I had a friend who was a gas station owner, and he was all dressed up pretty dirty. And he came to me and said, "Leonard, will you join the Moose?" And I kind of smiled and said, "No, thank you." I didn't feel that Moose was something that I wanted to be in. The Moose was anything raising my standards. So I was too busy anyhow. So I wasn't. Now, as far as the Elks was concerned, I never seeked to become a member, nor the Rotary, nor the Lions. Nobody asked me, and I never really looked forward to it.
You think in all of this organization you need to be invited to become a member?
Well, I am.
The Lions and the Rotary.
I think you have to be invited.
If you weren't running that thing, I'd make one comment.
Well, how does that make you feel? To have been, it would seem your family has dated to a long history. I mean, has a long history in Moscow, Idaho, in particular, and you've continued on, actually being very prominent part of the business community.
We do contribute to different political party or friends who are doing these type of stuff, but as far as taking
Membership.
But
leadership.
being invited as members of some of these organizations, it seems like it hasn't happened. And how do you feel about that?
I'm not gonna say anymore because
It doesn't bother me
it
because I'm
does
so
still bother
busy
you.
with everything I do. My days are so short that I can't dwell on
Not
anything
short,
like
but
that.
full.
If you'd shut that thing
Well.
off a minute, I could say something.
Be quiet.
Say it anyway.
Well,
I
they
don't
can cut it
I
out.
want to say it because I don't like it. I don't want it down there.
Well,
Don't
he
say it
says
then.
that if
We're
there's a
editing
thing
quite
that
a
they
bit.
do not want, then he would not. That's what he said.
Yeah, but I lie a lot too.
You do.
No, I don't. I don't.
Well, all right. This is a very opinionated statement. I just as soon have it not printed. Okay.
Don't
But-
say it then. If you
All
don't
right.
want
Yeah, I
to.
really shouldn't
I
say it.
wouldn't.
Yeah. Okay. I will.
It's
Okay.
best
Let's go on.
not said.
Yeah. Go on.
Would you desire to be more active, say in city government or in the conduct of city and county affairs, if you had an opportunity, or would you even seek that opportunity on behalf of yourself and maybe the Asian community?
Even though I read the newspapers and keep up with what's going on, I've never been able to reach a good, solid decision. I've always been able to see
Both sides.
both sides both sides of their opinions, and I'm always curious to know who wins and who loses, and like to know what they.
Do you foresee yourself stepping in and
Taking part?
And
No,
becoming
no, I
part of that
I don't see
process?
that.
Moscow has something unusual. It's an Asian club of mixed Chinese, Japanese, and so forth. In other communities, it's usually been a Chinese organization. What do you think about that?
Well, I think it's been great,
I think so
And-
too.
especially for I mean, it isn't all that old of an organization, and I wish it had been there, you know, when we maybe were first married. But for us and for our kids, I have really been glad that it was formed, because it has given the kids a chance to make contacts. Probably, I just feel a little bit sorry that they haven't been able to take some of these friendships on farther, that, you know, and some of these associations. But I think it's been really good for this community, and it has really opened up all of our eyes as far as, you know, the intercultural amongst all Oriental races.
I see a smile on Debbie's face when you
In what way?
on being able to
Take on.
extend or
Well,
Extend the
okay, for
friendships.
example,
Oh,
I mean, you know,
Develop
you've
or-
seen Loreca's kids all this time at several of the meetings, and yet, you know, her son has never bothered asking you to go anyplace or
Well-
whatever, and, you know, I just, you know, or
well, the thing is,
or daughter or whatever.
I think the thing is that there's an age difference. There's an age difference, and there is. He lives in a different place, and you're embarrassing me, and I don't know. I mean, that's
But yet
just
he
the
can
thing.
have all these associations with the Deary kids, but he doesn't with.
Oh well, you know, it's just
you know.
you don't sit there and pick out people.
Well, I
Just
do.
sit there and do. No, you don't. You don't do that. I don't believe in it. I don't believe in saying, okay, well, you know, he's Chinese, so maybe we should go out and, you know, maybe it'll lead into
course,
something.
you-
You know, I
you
don't
have
I
to
don't believe in
know
that.
the
If it's
person.
gonna work, it'll work. You know, if it doesn't, well, then it doesn't. You just don't. You don't.
Force it.
Yeah, you don't force those types of things. You don't sit there and say, yes, you are going to marry a Chinese, because you can't see the future. And, you know, even though you believe in that, it happens. Whether it's in our family or it's in somebody else's
If you
family.
believe in it, well, it's one step toward it already. Let's hear something from Michelle. We haven't heard anything from Michelle. Why don't you describe yourself, honey? You're 10 years old.
Do it to my
Well, Oh, she's 11 years old. Gosh, I lost one of the years. I've been doing so many other things that I can't keep track of all my 11 grandchildren.
Plus.
So, plus, no more.
Well, but you know, you had
Oh,
asked, you know,
plus,
what more did I expect of the association? Okay, and it's like I said, I would have hoped that it would just open, you know, again, like when I have my kids go to all these different organizations, from 4-H to piano to whatever. You know, I hope that it's going to open up new opportunities for different types of friendships, and I was hoping for the same thing.
We're about to run out of our second tape, so we'll stop.
Okay.
So, how are we doing here? Are we?
Are we done?